Well, staying on the topic of criminal justice, there are a number of January 6 militants who were convicted in federal court, and an opportunity for, once he becomes president again, for Trump to pardon those. Has he spoken about that at all? And on the same topic of pardons, trying to pardon himself or get someone to pardon him for, he's already been convicted in state court, and Jack Smith's investigation is not going anywhere at this point. But what do we know about what can happen with pardons once he becomes president again?
Sure. So, I mean, he has the constitutional authority as president to pardon those who have been already convicted with respect to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. He also has the ability as the head of the executive branch to direct his Department of Justice to dismiss all the pending cases where people have not yet been convicted, and direct that no more cases be brought under his administration. He has that authority, and the pardon authority is absolute from the Constitution. So, we have procedures that the executive branch has implemented in the Department of Justice over years, where normally in a normal administration, pardons are reviewed by the Office of the Pardon Attorney on a very much of an individual case-by-case basis, and a recommendation made by the pardon attorney that eventually makes their way to the desk of the president. But Mr. Trump showed us in his first administration he wasn't always really too concerned about going through that process, and some of his pardons he just made them without going through that process. So I think when it comes to, this is also an area, to be honest, where I think he may pull back some of his promises. I mean, at various times he's used various language. Yes, I'll consider pardoning those people. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. And so it could be that he will have some second thoughts about whether he wants to do a blanket pardons, maybe whether he wants to just try to restrict pardons to those who committed only completely nonviolent offenses like trespassing. Who knows? But he certainly does have that power. Now, when it comes to himself, not only can he direct his Department of Justice to dismiss the January 6th case pending in district court in D.C. and to dismiss the government's appeal of Judge Cannon's dismissal of the Mar-a-Lago documents case. He can direct that, but he may not even need to direct that because even in this interim period before he takes office, it's the Department of Justice long-time policy under both Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. The Office of Legal Counsel has always taken the position, and it's binding on the Department of Justice, that they cannot prosecute a sitting president. And so there's certainly not time between now and January 20th to get either of those cases through trial. And so I suspect that they will get wound down even before Trump is able to direct that they be dismissed, and just under department policy.
The delays that partly Judge Cannon was helpful to the Trump campaign in a lot of ways with the delays, and he definitely benefited from a lot of time so that his cases weren't prosecuted at that level. And now it remains to be seen what happens next, which of his promises, or some might call them threats, that will come to actuality. And is there anything that you're looking out for in the second term from once Mr. Trump does become president, that you think, especially from a legal perspective, what experts will be looking at just to see what happens next?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm most concerned about is something I raised right at the top of the interview, which is the misuse of the military. And I think, our military leaders throughout history have tried to be completely nonpartisan. That is what we want from a military. So they have spoken, including back during his first administration, after really, I think, some serious mistakes were made, even appearing with Donald Trump at Lafayette Square during the protest activity of that summer after George Floyd was murdered. I think those military leaders regretted having taken part in that because they did not want to be sending that message of sort of having a political position. So I think that that's an important point for military leaders to continue to reiterate, because the things that President-elect Trump has been talking on the campaign trail about doing really would be a misuse of military authorities for domestic law enforcement, whether are talking about, taking part in mass deportations or border law enforcement operations, or going into, as he has said before, going into mostly like democratically controlled cities to actually do law enforcement because of what he perceives to be rising crime problems. And notably, actually, crime is down. In fact, illegal migration is also down right now. Those are things. Not only would it be a really horrible precedent to have our military be engaged in that type of activity, but they're not trained to do that, right? They're trained for combat zones. They're trained to go generally abroad into combat zones. And so they're not expert in things that our state and local law enforcement and even our FBI, our federal law enforcement, get trained in, like First Amendment rights and Fourth Amendment rights. So he would be asking really way too much of them and putting them in a horrible position to be using them for domestic law enforcement, and particularly where it's just not necessary or warranted. So I see this as an area that's fraught with danger. Not only to sort of, as we were talking about earlier, rule of law and the integrity of our institutions, including the institution of the military, but also danger for Americans who might get sort of, caught up in police action by military soldiers.
So that's a strong red flag area to keep an eye on, the use of sort of an usurping executive power to control the military in means that have never been done, or not usually done domestically. Sometimes the National Guard during certain situations, but on a regular basis, we will see if that is something that Mr. Trump decides to change. And also that's something that a lot of autocratic governments have utilized. Right. So hopefully we don't go down that path, but we will be keeping an eye on all of this. I know you will as well, and I appreciate you joining us and flagging all these issues, talking about what we can look out for and what we can hope to see and what comes next. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I hope you will talk with us again soon.
My pleasure.